All right. Let's see if we can hopefully make it through this with no technical issues. Lots of new setup here. First time I guess it's the first time I've streamed in a really long time. So, anyways, here we go. What I thought we would start with today is EKS. So, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. Haven't written a template for it. So, I thought, why not start with something probably more challenging than we should start with, but I figured, hey, why not? So, like I said, I hope all the setup works and everything. Let's just dive right in. So, as usual, I've kind of done a little bit of work here beforehand, and I've got a VPC template which we've seen a bunch of times, but all the parameters set here and everything. I've got the starting of my CI script and a git ignore file, which we don't really care. Hey, Kevin, welcome. It's been a while. I'm trying new setup here. So, streaming from a single machine now. I'm hoping it all works okay, but we'll find out, I guess, right? So, yeah, really simple start here. We need a bunch of parameters passed into this template. So, really, what I'm thinking about is I'll just leave the defaults for now. It doesn't really matter in this environment. So, we don't care about any of these parameters. We'll leave those all at the defaults. This template allows us to create either a public VPC or a private VPC. The difference is that if we said is public no, then it doesn't connect the VPC to the internet. In this case, we want that, so I'll leave the defaults as yes. So the only parameters we need to pass are environment, owner, and owner email. These are all set with defaults, which work for today. So I actually think what we'll do is we will not override any of the parameters here. Okay. I think this is the right profile. It's been a long time since I've used this account, so we're going to see how this goes, right? Um, so let's check this in and see what happens. Let's see if we have immediate spelling mistakes, right? Might as well just pick up where we left off. So here's my empty project. Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot about this. So we'll do this merge and then I'll pull it down. Audio is focused heavily on the left, but the oh, you know what? Hang on, I wonder if I can fix that. I'm also using OBS instead of whatever it was the last time. Let me see if I can. I think there might be a filter I have to add. I think it defaults to like mono instead of stereo. Give me a second to see if I can quickly find this. There's always something you forget, right? I don't see anything obvious. Give me a second. It's probably just a setting I have to do somewhere. Hmm. Ah, here we go. Okay. Hopefully Reddit to the rescue. So let me see if I can find this. Settings audio. Audio set to stereo advancements. Hmm. Yeah, nothing obvious in here. We may just have to figure that one out after the fact. Yeah, all right. Well, you get to listen only in one ear today, I guess. This little setting right here, settings audio set to stereo and advanced mixer. Oh, I can see it on the mixer actually too. Now that I'm seeing it only in one. There's 2 bars here. Sorry, give me one more minute and let's see if we can get this sorted. Hmm. Did that change it? I'm seeing 2 bars now on my audio, so I don't know if that just changed it to stereo or not. We'll see how it goes. Oh, that's better? Okay, great. Mystery solved. All right, so we'll let this merge request go. Oh, we got a path issue, which I figured because again, you'd think by now I would remember the syntax of these CI scripts. It's right here, but I can never remember after all this time. I got a little cheater here, so let me just have a quick look at what that is actually supposed to look like. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we forgot template body. The rest of it looks pretty good, so let's see if that fixes it up. All right. And I look like I'm looking away from the screen because so I'm broadcasting off the Mac and I've got a small monitor on my right and a large monitor on my left. And I thought when I set it up on the large monitor, it just made the screen resolution too small. So I moved it to the smaller monitor, but the camera's on my left. So it's going to look like I'm looking off to the side here because I'm working on the small monitor. I might have to get something where I can change the setup of this or something. Had a nice little setup, and of course now I've messed it all up. Let's see how we did here now. Okay, there we go. So if we go back over to CloudFormation, same old thing. Oh, CO. Oh, I pushed it into the wrong account. Okay. Oops. Now that I'm thinking about it, we want to use the demo account, not the development account. So this should fix it. Here's another thing that I'll need to figure out. I've got the chat window open up on my iPad, but I don't have the little pop-ups on my screen here. I was hoping to have like in OBS have like some widgets or something that would show me what's going on so I don't have to keep looking down here, like chat and stuff like that, but I'll have to figure that out too. All right, let's see if that sorted it out. It might have now be going to the incorrect region. Yeah, okay, so there's what we want. So the reason it went to the incorrect region is in the setup here, what we do is we have GitLab assuming a role, and it uses a profile to assume that role. And in this account, the default, or the role that it's using is pointed to the CA region instead of US East 1, which is what I want to use. So what we'll have to do is not the best way to do this. Normally I'd set this up in the actual profile. Actually, you know what? Why am I making this hard? Why don't we just use CA Central 1? Shouldn't make any bit of difference. So let's just get rid of that. That way I don't have to type region everywhere. So yeah, that's fine. If we go back over here, did I delete that stack? I think I did. Yeah, okay. So what we'll do is we'll just rerun this pipeline. Which will create that VPC again. There we go. So as usual, if you remember, we always generate change sets. We go into the change set, we see the outcome of that change set. So lots of resources being created here when we create that VPC. So let's execute that. And that should get us started. I'll just make sure that there's no immediate failures, but in this case, I didn't actually, this template I've had for a while. So, and since I didn't override any of the parameters, it should work no problem. But we'll just give it a minute here based on past experience. So this looks good. So we'll let this run. And in the meantime, here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to create a cluster, an EKS cluster. And we'll see how far we can make it tonight. I'll probably just sort of ease back into this a little bit. So we're going to have two pieces that we're going to make. The first off is EKS has two main components, the control plane and the data plane. So when we create the cluster, you can see right here, what we're doing is we're creating the control plane. And you can see what this has is the instances that are running the Kubernetes software. Okay, so etcd, the API server, all of this is executed in or run on our behalf in an account that's managed by AWS. Okay, and then to communicate programmatically with Kubernetes, they expose the Kubernetes API for us. Easy. Okay, so that's what this first part is. Once the cluster is set up, what we're going to try to do is we're going to go down here and we're going to create ourselves a node group. Okay. The one thing I want to try just to see how it works is Fargate. And so the difference is we have a EC2 based implementation of Kubernetes and then a Fargate based implementation. And Fargate just provides us with a higher level of abstraction. So it means there's less for us to manage. Amazon manages the underlying components, and then we can go ahead and worry about the applications running on the Kubernetes server. So the node group, you'll notice here, creates an EKS managed node group as an auto-scaling group, and then creates the EC2 instances. So this is an example of an EC2 based implementation of Kubernetes. So I think what we want to try this go round is creates a Fargate. Yeah, okay, so this is I think this is what we need. You want to create a Fargate profile so that you can run pods on Fargate. Okay. We've done EKS with the node group before, never done EKS with Fargate. So I thought, hey, this would be a great way to figure out how this works, right? We'll use the stream as a bit of a guinea pig for this. So the first thing that we need is, regardless of whether going an EC2 based or a Fargate implementation, we need a cluster. So this is the first piece that we need to do. Okay. So you can see kind of, it's relatively simple, but we're going to most likely have to create some role information. We'll dig into the logging, see what's available here. If it's CloudWatch logs, what do we need there, right? The VPC configs. So I think what we'll do, like we always do, we'll just start digging through this and build it out. Okay. So the first thing is, let's define our actual cluster. Actually, maybe we'll make this a little better organized. So I'm going to create a directory, and we'll call this EKS. And then under here, we'll create cluster.yaml. And this will be the actual control plane piece. Okay. And again, I'm going to borrow off of one of our other projects. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to grab the beginning that we need here. And this is something that you would think by now I would remember, but I never do. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an EKS cluster. Okay. And then we need our parameters. And again, I'll just cut and paste. Oh, actually, I think I've got those parameters already defined over here. Yeah, so we'll just borrow from these because we'll keep everything the same. Okay. So that's our first piece. Why is this all lit up? I don't know why it's highlighting everything. Yeah, isn't that weird, eh? Okay, well let's push on and see what it does. I'm just gonna get rid of the metadata. We don't really need that. And then we'll change this back to I did some keyboard remapping. Also not a good idea before you try to do something. So then we'll say resources. And this is where we'll actually define, let's just call it, we'll call it EKS cluster. Okay, remember that's just our logical name anyways, so you can make that whatever you want. And I think I'll get back to the way that we did this before. We'll see what the resolution looks like. So we'll do the half and half screen. Save us from jumping back and forth, right? Resize it a little bit. Okay. So hopefully that, Kevin, let me know if that is okay as far as resolution. You can see everything okay. This is really ticking me off. I don't understand why it's all description. Schema conversion is not allowed. And it sure looks just like this, doesn't it? All right, well, we're just going to keep going on. Our first thing is encryption. Looks good? Yeah, okay. Encryption config. Let's see what this says here. So the provider, so what's going to provide encryption for the cluster, and then the resources to be encrypted. The only value here is secrets. So I think for the time being, we won't worry about secrets encryption. So let's keep it simple, at least to see if we can get a template, a skeleton template built here. So under network config, let's have a look here. So what's the IP family? And then what's the IP range that we want to assign to the Kubernetes environment? And then we've got specific ranges. So if we don't specify one, it uses 10.100 or 172.20. We recommend that you specify a block that doesn't overlap. Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty standard. So let's do this. We'll do hey Kevin, I forgot. I meant to ask you the other day. Did you get the bees unwrapped yet, or are you waiting a little longer? We're gonna just take the 10-100 range that's mentioned here. Where did it go? Oh, 10-100-0016. Okay, so that's our network config. The unique name to give to your cluster. I think in the past we've never given it a name, right? We always let CloudFormation just name it. In a project that we've been working on recently, we are actually, customer asked us to put names in, so they're a little easier to understand. I think we'll leave name out, and we'll see what happens in CloudFormation, because it'll generate this name for us. Okay. All right. Just a little longer, probably next week. Yeah, I guess it's been getting too cold overnight still, right? At least here it's still been pretty cold. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so do we want to set an endpoint private access? The default for this is false, which means it's going to be publicly accessible. I think this is what we're going to do, because otherwise we would need resources within a VPC to be able to talk to the Kubernetes API. And I think what I'd like to do for this project is just be able to get kubectl running on a laptop and be able to, launch some pods or something on this just to see it all work. So I think we'll leave endpoint private access to false. So that's the default parameter, so we don't worry about that. And then endpoint public access, the default here is true. So that's what we want, right? So we'll leave that. Public access CIDRs. The default value is 0 if you've disabled private endpoint and you have nodes or Fargate pods in the cluster to ensure they specify. Again, like, I think we're going to leave this. We'll just see what it does. Okay. Kind of learning some of this as we go. And then we probably do need some security groups. And then we want subnet IDs for the nodes that are going to be launched within the cluster. So that means we've got to define security group IDs, which is a list of a string. So we got to come up with that still. And then our subnet IDs, also a list of the strings. So, oops. Oh, I just did there. So here's another. Wow, that's weird. I don't know why it's doing that. There's something in this file that it's not liking, and that's why it's all underlined in orange. It's weird. I did this all day today, and I never had this happen. So I don't know. Typical, right? Created a YAML file. Strange. Yeah, I think actually I looked here the other day, and I want to say one night this week it's going to be still, like freezing temperatures overnight. So I guess that is too cold. So we need to create a security group, and we need to refer to the private. We'll put these in the private subnets within our VPC. So what I'm going to do is, these are our tag parameters. So we'll kind of try to organize this a bit so we can come back and find it later. And then I'll just call this stack parameters. Okay, so we'll say VPC stack, and this is how we'll do, if you remember, we always do the exports and import thing. So we'll put this in our CI script. Why don't we start building this out now? So we'll deploy. We'll just put all these in a single stage. It doesn't really matter for the most part. So we'll say stack name. And we'll just call this, what we did here was we said EKS VPC. So we'll just call it EKS cluster. Actually, I guess if we're following this, it would be cluster-EKS, right? Because what we've done, bad name up here, but there's the service at the end. So we'll do the same thing. And then I need the VPC stack because we're going to pass that in as a parameter. And we know that's just EKS VPC. And then this is EKS / cluster. Okay, that's fine. And now we do need -- parameter overrides VPC stack. Oh, another remapping there. There we go. Okay. So in theory, that would deploy it if we had everything we needed. And no spelling mistakes. So we'll run a simple validation, just the regular CloudFormation validation here. Perfect. So that's the basic piece here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, I got to look up the import command. Give me 1 second here. Actually, we'll do that here. So remember, this just allows us to pull exports from one template and inject them into this one. So the export in this case will be the IDs of the subnets in our VPC where we want the cluster to deploy our nodes. And yes, this is the structure of the command, but we use the short version of this. So see here how they're using the exclamation, and I still don't remember what the command is. Give me a sec. I'm just going to borrow again. This is what I want. So here's the structure that we're going to use for these. Okay. And we'll say we're going to change these to private subnet 0, private subnet 1. Now, I'm just going to check to make sure these are the actual export names we used in the VPC. So I can go back over here. Actually, let's just shrink all of this down. We're after this. So there's the structure, right? So I just want to make sure private subnet 0, private subnet 1. So that's great. That picks up those. Now what we could do is we have to think about the security group. So let's have a quick look at what the documentation says on this. For more information, let's have a look. Okay, so this is what we're creating right now. We're creating the cluster security group. What's it say here? It's designed to allow all traffic from the control plane and the managed node groups to flow freely between each other. The cluster security group is assigned to the Elastic network interface. Okay, so they've got a recommended structure here, recommending all inbound traffic on all protocols, all ports from itself. Okay, and then standard all outbound. Although if we wanted to, we could make something a little more restrictive. This is our minimum ports. Yeah. So what we've done here is we're saying all ports from itself, but now if we look at the inbound traffic, we've got just 2 ports that need to be, or 3 ports. I don't know what to do with this. Control plane security group. And there are nodes here. I think what we'll do, let's try it like this. And if we have to, if we can't get it to work for some reason, we can open it back up. Now the interesting part here is that the source is itself. So we actually have to do this in 2 steps. So what we have to do is we have to create the security group, and then you have to create the ingress and egress rules separately, because otherwise we have a reference to something that doesn't exist yet. Okay, so this, I remember this screwing us up one time before. So we'll have to go back and we'll look at the CloudFormation documentation for this and just make sure we understand how to set this up. But I think it's 2 steps. The next thing is, I think what we'll do is we'll go directory. Okay, we'll do this, and we're going to do some reorganizing of this. Which means we have to change this now too, right? This will be, right? And I think I'm going to put the security groups here. Let's borrow these. Look at that. See, isn't that weird, eh? That worked perfectly fine. Did I mess this up maybe? I'm still wondering why in here all of this is underlined as a problem. Okay, well, we'll leave it for now. So we'll do the same thing before. We'll say stack parameters, and then we'll say tag parameters. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here because we have to associate the security group to a VPC, so that's fine. Okay. And then we'll say so we're going to call this, what are we creating here? We're creating the cluster security group. I think it's under EC2. There it is. So see how you've got security group, then you've got egress and ingress. So we can put everything in one piece here, but that would cause a problem because the ingress rule has to refer back to the security group. So if we scroll down, we require a group description, but we don't require any rules, right? Ingress or egress. So what we'll do is we'll keep this really simple, and we're just going to say type we will give it a group description. That's required. So we'll just call this EKS cluster security group. Okay. Group name. Again, I don't know about the group name. Let's see what it looks like. because it'll normally just generate this. I think it generates it itself. Let's see. I'm on the fence with the group assigning the names and stuff. I used to be pretty adamant that we wouldn't do it, but to be honest, in the last project that we're working on, we've got a well-documented naming standard. We can create all the names programmatically in the CloudFormation templates. So I'm less against it, but I want to see what this will do. So we'll leave that off. We don't want egress. We don't want ingress. We're going to do that separately. Okay. We will tag it, and we do need to add a VPC ID. So we'll borrow from our cluster because it'll be the same structure again, like this. Now we'll double check, but I think if I recall the template, for whatever reason, when we created the template and we set up the outputs, we didn't, normally we try to give it some additional information in the output, the export name, but for some reason we didn't here. So I'll show you what I mean. If we scroll back here, what I'm after is the unique identifier of the VPC. So VPC dash something. So like a lot of times I would say dash ID here. Actually, let's fix this because it's kind of annoying. So I just do dash ID. Okay, and then over here I can just do dash ID. Okay. And we will put tags on this. And do I have tags in the VPC? I normally do. I think we can probably just, yeah, this is what I was after. Okay, oops, get rid of that. I'm gonna change this up, and it's gonna throw an error at me, but this way, I like the sub command a little better. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, okay, I got the right keyboard map. What am I doing wrong here? Over here. There we go. Wow. Okay. And we're just going to call this, why don't we put in a little more variation here? Not that it matters in this environment, but we'll say, right? So is it dev, is it production, that kind of thing. And then we'll just put in here cluster, actually let's do EKS cluster SG. And we'll just now get rid of that line. Okay. And what we'll also do is, if you remember back here, control plane and node security groups. So there's our control plane. Here's our node security groups. So I don't know if we'll need this, but let's just create the skeleton of it for now. And I'll just grab all of this. And we'll change this. Okay. So there's our two security groups. None of them have any sort of rules. So what we're going to do is we're going to add rules to the cluster security group for now to meet. I think what we'll do is we'll start down here with these. Okay. So we've got minimum inbound traffic. What's the star for? Okay, so any other communication between the nodes within the cluster, we should include here. I don't know what this is at this point, so we'll just do exactly what they have here. Okay. So we'll just call these rule TCP 443. I don't know. Forget what that was called. Oh, security group ingress. Oh, and we need the depends on here because we want to make sure that the cluster security group exists before we try to create a rule, right? That depends on that. So now we can say properties. Okay, so the source here is just the security group. So we'll say description, allow TCP. Let's say from port is 443, to port is 443. Is TCP. Now this is what we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the source security group ID. Source security group ID. And I can't remember actually. We're going to check the output values of this. So see here, when you pass the logical ID, it returns the resource ID. So we should be able just to go here and say ref cluster security group. Okay. Now, actually, as I'm thinking about this, do we need to create individual? This right here, or can we create multiple? This looks like it's just a single rule. See the example here? So here's their security group, and then they're adding rules to it, inbound and outbound rules. So I think I need individual. The way it looks, I need to create individual rules. So if we go back here, oh, that's our, okay. Minimum inbound traffic. So now this is 10, 250. Actually, I don't want to type all this, right? So we just. So that's that rule. We need DNS on two protocols. So we'll need and then do the same thing here and just change this to TCP. Now I'm going to just stop here and we're going to deploy this. Oh, I'm going to change that. We're going to deploy this and see what happens because I think I'm missing something here because this isn't associated to anything at this point. So let me just check what else we need to add here. What am I missing? Oh, group ID right here. So this is how we associate this role or this rule to a particular security group. I think that's what that means. Am I looking in the right spot? You can see I don't do it like this often because the self-reference thing is not something you run into a whole lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that right here. And we'll say ref cluster security group. Okay. Let's see if that works. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've created it like this. And I'm going to leave this in here. Well, we'll check actually. I'm interested to see what the validation does on that file since it has so many highlighted errors. And for now, we're just going to do the validation piece of this. We won't worry about creating the deployment stage. So let's see what happens here. Oh, look, I've got it to do. Hold on. I think that was in here. Right here. So what we can do is we can fix this now. Okay. And then we'll go. And this won't actually work because there is no output, but I think at least it should get through the validation check at this point. I think. Let's just call this SGID. We'll just shorten the name up a little bit. And then the thing that we have to do here is we do have to make sure that in our deploy script, it's got both of these set. Otherwise, it will throw an error. So we need here, that's the VPC. So we'll call it SG stack. Call it EKS. SG. Okay. Again, it doesn't really matter at this point, but I want to make sure that it's got enough there. Let's see what it does. I'm expecting a bunch of errors, but it should clear up the to-do statement. There we go. Okay, failed. Let's see what we got wrong. So it's calling the security group template, YAML not well formed, line 42. Too much cutting and pasting, probably. Line 42. Oh yeah, look what I've done here. That's got to be back like that. Yeah, see when I did the cut and paste? I never noticed that. All right. Is that a brand new one again? Yeah, just now. I was working on something today that if I showed you the CI script for it, it would actually be. I was having a little bit of imposter syndrome today. We're trying to get something working, and I have like pages of CI failures. Um, I won't go into the details, but it was a really odd little quirky thing in CloudFormation that we could not figure out, and we were literally just going, simple small change by simple small change over and over and over, trying to figure out a way to make this work. Good news is that we did get it to work eventually, but if anybody ever looks at that pipeline, they're like, what the heck were they up to that afternoon? Actually, I say afternoon, but I pretty much spent my entire day on it. And I was really happy at about 4:51, I was able to say, this is done, it is working. But it was a battle today to get it to work. Okay, so we've got another sort of formatting issue in the security group template. What is that, line 67? Yeah, again, see when you copy these? Look, I've got each of them like that. I'm sure this is the way that I'm doing the copy, but I never notice it. All right, there we go. Try that again. Oh yeah, definitely. You'll also notice that I'm trying this thing called conventional commits now. So we preface all of our commits with something. So you probably saw me say CI when we were making changes to the CI template itself. Fix, do a lot of fixes, right? Features. So like if I was to add a new security group or something like that, I might call, feature colon. If we're making documentation changes, like, so a lot of times we'll have markdown files, so just preface those with doc and then whatever you changed. the idea is that later on, if we wanted to go back and be able to maybe programmatically deal with all the commit messages, we could go and parse them easily. I don't know if we ever will, but it's nice to have some sort of standard that everybody's trying to adhere to. I say trying, right? There we go, passed. Great. So let's go back over here. Go back to CloudFormation, and I'm expecting a new stack. There's our cluster EKS. Now we're not going to try to deploy that because we know it's not going to work, right? It needs the security group stuff. So what we'll do now is, now that we know both of these templates are clean, we're going to do deploy SG. Okay, and we'll call this, I think we just called it, actually I'm going to go EKS because it's not just for the cluster. Oh, that's what I did right here. We'll get rid of that. What did I call this? Networking, I think. Yeah, networking. Okay. It does need the VPC stack, so we'll parameter override the VPC stack so that it knows where to associate our security groups to. And in theory, that should do it. So let's recommit this. So like in this case, if I follow that conventional commit, we use CI, right? Added SG to deploy stage. And then we'll push that. Drag this over here. It's like watching your kettle boil, isn't it? There we go. So let's see if this will actually deploy. So change sets. Here's what we're doing, right? So we were creating two security groups. The node security group for now has nothing, but then we're adding some inbound rules. What I'm interested to see here is when you create a security group, by default, it allows no inbound traffic and all outbound traffic. But since we're doing this programmatically, I wonder what will happen. Will this cluster group have only the inbound rules and no outbound rules? I don't really know, to be honest. I can't recall. So let's see what it does, assuming that it deploys, which is always up in the air when we're writing this stuff. There we go. Oh, yeah. All right. So that's because when we changed the output value, we didn't go back and change, like we didn't run the actual change set. So if we look at this change set, it's going to be blank, and that's can be confusing. The reason it's blank is because really all we're doing is we're changing the name of an export, so it doesn't show you anything when you're making changes to outputs. The other thing to keep in mind here is that we wouldn't be able to change the name of an export like we're doing now if it's used anywhere else, right? So you would have to, this is something that you would want, if you're going to change your output names, you'd probably want to do it early in the project, because once you have this VPC template, which would normally be tied to a lot of other templates, you can imagine that you don't want to, well, it would be challenging to be able to change that output name after the fact, right? Without potentially doing a lot of gymnastics to make it work. So this is easy for us now because we don't really have anything here. Okay, so while that's running, we'll just delete this. And this should be done immediately. And then if I go over here, now you'll notice that we have that actual export name. Okay, so that's why this failed, because that export didn't exist. So we'll just go back over here and we'll run this piece again, okay, which will recreate our stack for us. There we go. So let's see what happens now. That export name should exist now. There we go. At least it didn't fail immediately. Let's see if we got the rest of this working. Perfect. Ah, security. Oh, look, there we go. Spelling mistakes. Always spelling mistakes. Unbelievable. And since we cut and pasted it, it's everywhere. Even up here. Okay, so here's my most common conventional commit message. Typo in XX template, right? So we'll say security group template. It's always typos. All right, so that's gone away. At least we're still early in this, so we've got not a long wait for the pipeline to run. You're right, it does only count as one typo, right? I like that. Let's see here. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. It's all standard since we've done it a couple times. You know, the beauty of this is once we get these templates done, you know, the project we're working on right now, we're going through all of this in for the dev environment, right? The nice part is once we get it working in the dev environment, the templates are built with as little hard coding as we possibly can, so that we can take those same templates now and using a different profile point them at, in this particular environment, the customer would have like an acceptance UAT environment. So we're going to take those same templates, deploy them in the next environment, which is great because now that we've had the chance to work out all of the kinks, right? There are no spelling mistakes. So now when it deploys into the next environment, it should be quick and pretty easy. So that's encouraging. All right, so that's good. If we go over to the VPC now, and we'll just filter. Here's our VPC. We'll go down to security groups. Here are the two security groups we created. I'll just this a little bigger. Here's the default one. Okay. We're going to just go into the default one and remove the rules. So there are no inbound or outbound rules. This kind of adheres to some of Amazon's best practices. So normally we would do that programmatically. And you'll notice here on the default VPC, we have done that. Okay. Now these are the two new ones we created. There's our node security group, which has no inbound. And there's the outbound rule. So it's going to create that outbound rule by default. Now let's see what it did over here. There's our outbound rule. And then on the inbound rule, we're allowing DNS, TCP, UDP, HTTPS, and then a custom TCP rule on this port. And the source is the cluster security group. Okay. So there we go. So now we've got that security group created. What we can do is we can go back over. Actually, we're missing a step. We haven't outputted anything. So we've got to go here. And we've got to set up some outputs. So let's do cluster security group. Okay. The value is, I'm going to assume that it's we just want the security group ID, but we'll check this. And then we'll use the sub command here to create the output name programmatically. And I'm just going to borrow again off of here. Okay. So we'll do this. and we'll say cluster SG ID, and we'll just create our node security group as well. That way, we're going to need it at some point, I think. Again, you know, the Fargate thing I'm not as familiar with, so I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like in the end, but we'll create this for now. Maybe what we could do is we could actually, just for demo purposes, end up with an EC2 based implementation of EKS and then a Fargate based implementation. And what would be really interesting is to see if we could create all of that in a single template. And that would give us an opportunity to look at like conditions and stuff like that. That might be kind of cool, actually. I think we did this on our last little project. I'm going to create here what we'll just call, actually, we've got a README, don't we? Let's go here. Okay. And you can see they've got a little sample. So we'll just go. Let's just get rid of all of this. We'll create ourselves a little to-do list here. Okay. We want this to be in a single template, right? And then we could just put a parameter value that says, I don't know, deployment type EC2 Fargate. Okay. So based off of that, it decides what to use in the template. That might be kind of neat just to demonstrate how it would work. Okay, so then we want to go here and we want to say node security group. And then we'll export this and we'll give it the same structure here. And we'll just call it node SG. All right, perfect. So that's this piece now. So now we can refer to this. So if we go back over to our cluster, which is still all lit up orange. Oh, look at that, cluster SGID. Cluster SGID. It's annoying to look at, but let's see what it does. So actually, before we try deploying it, let's go back over to the EKS section here and just see what else is required, if anything here. So cluster. So we decided not to do encryption. Okay. We've got the network config. We don't have logging. We don't have a name. We put in the resources VPC settings. So that's the SG, the subnets. It does need a role. Okay, so I'll have to look at that, and then it needs tags and a version. If you don't specify a version, the latest version available. We should probably specify a version. So the way that I'd normally do this, we could run some CLI commands and stuff like that, but a lot of times what I find easier, the challenge here is that the structure of this might not be right. So I'm going to go over here and say create a cluster. See this? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go like this. EKS version. The type is a string. The default is 1.21. And then we'll say allowed values 1.22. Again, I bet you there's a fancier way to do that, but that's the way that I often do it, especially if it gives you a nice clean list like this. Now, the challenge is I have seen, like, we created an open search environment the other day for a customer, which might actually be another good set of templates to go through. And it might say OpenSearch version 1. But in here, it actually looks like something like this. I can't remember the exact structure, but it was something odd. It looked like this, right? So I'm hoping that it's what you see in the console is what you can use in here. We'll find out. So we need the version, and then we also need, go here. Did I say we needed? We need a role ARN. So we'll use the ever handy to do. We need the version, which will just now refer back to EKS version, and then tags, which will borrow again from our VPC template. That way we've got the same set of tags for everything. Okay. Owner email. Now I'm going to change this again. I liked the way that we set them up here. I think it's a little, I find it easier to read than this, right? Less typing too. So we're going to get rid of this. Stack name, environment, and we'll just call this cluster EKS. Okay, so that's all good. That's there. Now we need to figure this out. Yeah, so we need this because Kubernetes, managed by AWS, makes calls to other AWS services on our behalf. Like, so if we think about this in the simple way, then if we were using an EC2 based implementation of EKS, it's making calls to EC2, right? It might have to create a new EC2 instance for us. And the way that it does that is to use a role. So we need to have this set up. So let's see what we've got here. Prior to 2020, it was required and the suggested name was blah. With the EC2 service role for EKS service linked role, that policy is no longer required for clusters created on or after. So this service link role is a role that would be created on our behalf by Amazon. We can't actually change it, but it essentially is going to allow a service to communicate with other services. Okay. It depends on the service that you're using. So I'll use the OpenSearch example. If you create an OpenSearch cluster through the management console, it will create the service role that it needs for you. If you create the OpenSearch cluster programmatically, it doesn't. So you need to create it. So what we'll do here is we'll look, I would assume that EKS is going to be the same. Since we're doing it programmatically, it won't be there. So we'll have to figure this out. Oh, excuse me. Spring is here. All right. So check for an existing role. I'm really confident we don't have an existing role. Okay. So what we need to do now, it's interesting that they talk about this was also required in the suggested name. Let's have a look at where this takes us to. That takes us to, oh, look at this. Okay, so let's actually have a look at something here. EKS service policy. So this is the policy, not the role. Okay, so then if we go over here, see, so there's no EKS role. So let's just see, what did this say again? Oh, okay, sorry. I'm looking at this thinking they're talking about a service linked role where it clearly says policy in the name. Okay, so this is the role, that's the policy. So the policy is here, this role is not. That policy is no longer required for clusters created. Yeah, I'm a little confused as to where this comes from. Because like if I look in the OpenSearch documentation, it'll tell you how to create this service role. I don't see it here. Basically what it's doing is it's saying create a role and then assign this policy to the role. All right, so there's the trust policy, and then you associate the policy to the role. EKS cluster policy. Well, I think we won't, I'll do some research on the service link role, but for the time being, we can just do create the role with the trust policy and then associate the EKS managed policy to it. So I think we'll do the same thing here. We'll go, we'll create a security directory, and then we'll create under here. Actually, let me see how I did this in the other project. Oh, okay, I see how I did it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to match this up. Plunk this over here. And we're also just going to shorten this name. This is probably going to sting us in the end. But we'll do it now because it's easier. Okay, so there's SG. So the first thing we should do, I'm going to make this window a little bigger for now. I just want to change these. So that becomes security SG. I think, and then here. Okay, a little less typing. And then what we'll do, borrow off of one of these, doesn't matter what. All right. So we'll call this the cluster role. And we'll have this, look this up here quickly. This is pretty simple. So we need assume role policy document. This is essentially the trust policy of that of the role. So who or what can assume this role, and we can get what we need right from here. So version. So in this case, we're saying allow the EKS service to assume this role. And the action that is allowed is the security token service assume role. Okay. Easy. In theory, until we find a typo. So that's the first part. And then in this case, we're going to use a managed policy ARN from Amazon. So I'm going to say description IAM role for EKS deployment. And then we're going to say manage policy ARNs, and this is another list. And we can grab, if we go back to policies, and it needed, I think it was just this one, wasn't it? EKS service policy? EKS service policy. So what we'll do here is we can grab the ARN. If we click on it, the ARN is what we need. So we'll just paste that right into there. So that's the role, okay? And we'll need an output for this, because we'll need the whatever whatever output comes from this role, we need then to associate that to the cluster config. And if I recall, in that cluster config, it said IAM role ARN. So if we go here and say return values, where'd the return values go? Here we go. So if we use a ref here, we get the resource name. So that's not what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say cluster role, and I'm actually going to do a couple outputs here. And the reason I do this is we might find later on that one service needs the ARN and another service wants us to pass maybe the name of it. So quite often I'll do something like this. So we'll say value is ref cluster role. And instead of trying to remember this, I'll just go. Okay. And then here we'll say cluster role name. Now we need the get attribute value, or not value, I guess, intrinsic function. And then we'll say ARN, and I'll just go ARN. So now I've got both options, just in case I need it for whatever reason. Okay. And we need to put this into our CI script. So just grab this. Sorry, when this window is short like this, I can't seem to grab the line. So let's just go like that. Okay. Now I saw something today, again, when we were trying to fix that little problem. I saw something that I've never tried in here before. So there's a dependencies component here. So what I'm going to try this. I don't know what it's going to do. So I'm going to say this depends on deploy IAM. Okay. And the reason I want to test this out is I have some data outputs coming from here that I need to include down here. And I just want to see what this looks like more in the CI side than anything, because generally we create change sets for everything anyways. So somebody's going to go in and approve those changes and accept the deploys. But I'm just interested to see what this does on the CI side. So we're going to say stack is EKS IAM, and we'll include that down here as well. Okay. And I don't think we actually have that in here. Right? And then we can do, now this specifically says role here, so, or ARN here, so we're going to say IAM stack cluster role ARN. I have no idea if that's what I called it over here. Cluster role ARN. Okay, great. So again, in theory, this looks good, other than the fact that it's really ugly because of all this. Okay. I wonder if it doesn't like the, what if it doesn't like these? It'd be weird that it's causing, no, that was a long shot, wasn't it? Totally stuck on this. It's like it doesn't like the start of every line. Okay, well. So we're going to go here now, and we're going to say, so I made a bunch of changes, right? So I'm going to say CI added IAM. We're going to say feature added IAM, and then I'll say fix added IAM to cluster. It's pretty much, I think, what we did. I know I changed the cluster CI, or not the cluster CI, sorry, the paths. So I wouldn't be shocked here if CI comes back and says our CI is invalid, but let's see what it happens. A lot of times when you do those refactor things, they seem simple until you try to run it. And the other thing I'm interested in is if we go in here, that dependency piece. Yeah, see, it doesn't look any different. I was expecting this to kind of maybe because it's all in one stage. I don't know. I'll have to do some more reading. It just caught my eye today. Oh, there we go. Deploy IAM. Failed. Oh. Okay, so this is the downside of cutting and pasting everything. So we've got a stack in here that we don't need. Now, I'm thinking of something though as we did this. You need in here, you need dash capabilities, capability IAM. Okay. So let's try this again. So fix, we removed parameter from IAM, and then CI. So whenever you put IAM resources in any stack, right? So if I had IAM resources in the VPC stack or the SG stack, you actually have to, what you're doing here is, if I show you in the console, if you try to deploy something through the console, there's a little checkbox at the end that says if you're deploying identity and access management resources, you have to acknowledge that you know you're doing that. So programmatically, you have to also include that. And there's two capabilities. I think it's, I want to say it's capability IAM and then capability named or something like that. We're going to see if I got this right. The difference is, remember, often I say, well, we're just going to let CloudFormation name this. If you let CloudFormation name an IAM resource, then you just go with capability IAM. If you're naming resources, so you're creating a role and you assign a name to that role, like, I don't know, MLB Pirates IAM role, okay? When you do that, then you have a named resource and you have to change that to capability named or named capability. I can't remember what it's called. Okay. So that's what I'm doing in line 23 here. And we'll see if I've got the right value here. It'll complain pretty quickly on me if I didn't get it right. I got a 50-50 shot, I figure. Let's see what it does. Sorry, Kevin. I knew you were the Pirates fan. Are they still having a rough go of it? I watched part of a game from the other day from them, but I haven't followed them a whole lot. Are they off to a rough start? Was there actually a 21 nothing? No way. This year? Yeah, that would be tough even for a diehard fan. Okay, so we're going to deploy this first because we need this IAM role for the cluster itself. Saturday, who was it against? Oh boy. They're down again. Last year was 20-1. So they actually got worse against the Braves. This year it was against the Cubs. Yeah, that's tough. Man, they're playing 500 ball. That run differential is well, I guess you take that one game out, it's not too bad. Right? Minus, what's that? -7? You could be Cincinnati. Wow. All right, let's see here. All right, so there's our IAM role. Okay, so now we've got the role created. in theory now, I think we have enough to create the control plane here. Let's see what happens. I suspect spelling errors will get us, but you never know. There we go. No export named. Oh man, that one's a painful one. All right, so let's have a look here. What did we call this? Cluster SG ID. Did I add these after the fact? I did. Empty outputs. Oh. Outputs are really handy for tying these kind of templates together, but if you think about them after the fact, they always sting you like this. Okay, so that's easy. So this is actually an okay one to try to recover from. So we'll just delete that. And then we don't have to run the pipeline again. We can just simply go in here and click that. And we should see it pop back up here. All right, that's a little different. The provided role doesn't have the EKS managed policies associated with it. Please ensure the following policies. Well, isn't that interesting? Because that's not what it told us in the documentation, right? And did I misread that? Ensure that EKS cluster policy is associated to the role. Policies attached to your EKS cluster. Ah, so what did we associate to it? Oh, sorry, I read this wrong. So this is prior to 2020. This role was also required, but I guess what they're saying now is this is the policy we need. Okay. So again, easy fix. So let's go here and we'll delete this. And then we do have to look that policy up. There's our cluster policy. Okay, well let's try this. I shouldn't have deleted that stack. Okay, yeah, that's the Amazon EKS cluster policy. All right. Get rid of that. And then we'll do the same thing. We're going to grab this. We'll go back to IAM. You know, I'm going to have another look at this. Search for it again, and let's just have a look at this. So the policy allows the Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes to create and manage the necessary resources to operate clusters. I almost think we need both of these. It seems a little confusing. I think I'm going to leave both. So we've got the service policy and the cluster policy. You must create a role with the following policies, and it talks about this. Okay, so if we actually read and understand this, what it's saying is you have to create a role that has this policy associated to it, which is this one, okay? And then it's saying prior to 2020, you also needed this role. But now, if we're creating things after 2020, we don't need both. Okay. And I'm pretty sure it's after 2020 at this point, although time has lost all meaning. So that's sufficient, I think. Okay, so associated correct policy with IAM role. Oh, before we do that, okay, that's cleaned up. So I should have looked to see if the Jays were playing tonight. They are, and they're winning. Hey, there we go. They've been playing good baseball. Not the type of baseball that I think people thought they were going to play, like lots of high-scoring games, but still winning, so it's fun to watch. All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to run the update here, right? Because we know we're changing the policy. So let's do that first. Here's our change set, right? We're modifying cluster role, and it's not going to replace it. So this is really why we're after the change sets, right? Save you at 2 o'clock in the morning by giving you a second chance to make sure you understand what you're doing. So that should be pretty quick. I don't like when it takes this long. Usually means a typo. Okay, there we go. So now this should have the right role at least, or it has the right role. It's always had the role associated to it, but the correct policy. Okay, didn't error out immediately. It's good. So let's see here if we push our luck, go over here. Nothing. Oh, I'm in the Canadian region. I don't know why that switched me back. There we go. So see, that's the cluster name. So this is something that we could look at and maybe make that name something other than -Z3G. I don't know. It doesn't really bother me because normally, I guess we haven't made it this far yet, but I have tags, right? So I might have a specific tag that I look for, that I search for, something like that. Okay, so you can see it creating everything. There's the role that we created earlier on. I'll do a little more reading about the secrets encryption. We really should have this enabled, and then we'll have to create a KMS ID for it. So we'll work on this over the next couple weeks and get it all going and get some pods running and stuff on it. Yeah, starting, right? I wasn't sure if first stream back I wanted to start thinking about Kubernetes or do something a little less brain intensive, but I'm glad I did. This might take a bit of time to stand up. I would assume everything here is going to be empty. There's our subnets, right? So we gave it the subnet information. There's the VPC. Here's the service range. So these would be the IP addresses that are used by the resources within the cluster. And remember here that the point of this is to make sure you don't overlap with anything else. And I think when we created the VPC, I think it's 1098. So we've got no overlap there. Yeah, so here's our EKS VPC. So it's 1098, so that's fine. 2 subnets. Security group looks like it's getting us. It's interesting. There's our cluster security group. It's empty, and then here's our additional security group. Oh, that's weird. I would have thought maybe it just hasn't updated. I would have thought that that would have been associated up here. Remember, we made it public, access list. We've got no add-ons, no authentication, no logging at this point. Yeah, and then here are the tags that I was mentioning. So like a lot of times I might have like an application in here or even the environment. So if I'm looking for something later on, I could use the tagging information to find the particular EKS cluster or something like that, right? Yeah, this is going to take a bit of time. So while we're waiting for this, I think we'll probably wrap up here. We'll kind of ease back into this. But I wanted to have a quick look at, where was it? Remember it said about logging? Yeah, so here's cluster logging. So enabled types, let's go back here. I wish this would remember I only want YAML. Okay, so logging. Why don't we just maybe put some placeholders in for this? And this is hard to look at. So we've got logging, cluster logging, enabled types. Now we're getting into some sort of list. So what do we got here? Type. The name of the log type. Okay. I would assume we missed a reference somewhere. The enabled control plane logs for your cluster, all log types are disabled. Okay, so where do we find the different logging info? Okay, here we go. Cluster plane logs. Let's see what we got. Okay, so here are our cluster plane log types. Each log type corresponds to a component of the control plane. API audit. Okay. The question is, where do they, I would assume they go to a log group of some sort. So let's do this. Let's go. So here are our types. Cluster logging, logging type, type string. Can we have multiple types, I guess? Yeah, okay. So we could do, I think if I'm reading this right, we're going to do API. Because it just says that this is cluster logging. And it's a list of type config. API. Yeah, okay. So this matches up with the documentation. I'm just wondering, it feels weird to have to enter, like, if I'm reading this right, it goes like this. Like we could add whatever logs we wanted. Like that? That doesn't look right. I wonder if they give us an example here if we go back to... Sometimes I find the examples a little on the thin side. Scroll down. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, there we go. So that's the way it works. It feels weird, but anyways. So do we want to... Let's just turn them all on. Right? It's not like we're going to generate a ton of logs anyways. So we've got authenticator, and then we've got controller manager. Be interesting just to see what they at least spit out, right? And scheduler. Okay. What do we got? We got 5 different log types. This is going to take a bit of time. So I think what we'll do is we'll call it here. Keep it short for the first night. What have we been doing here for about an hour and change, maybe? Yeah, an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. So I think we'll call it here. We'll come back next week, same time, get back into the groove of doing these Tuesday evening CloudFormation sessions, and we'll see everybody on Tuesday, and we'll try to finish up the EKS stuff. Okay. Yeah, good to see you, Kevin. And yeah, we'll talk later. Bye, everybody.